On November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the armistice was signed, which ended the First World War. Thereafter, November 11th was celebrated as Armistice Day, with Congress making the date a federal holiday in 1938. After World War II, the date became known as Veterans Day, a change recognized by Congress in 1954, declaring it to be a day to honor all American veterans of all wars. Let us observe a moment of silence for those who have not come home to their families. If you wish to participate in the following prayer, please bow your heads. Lord, keep our troops forever in your care. Give them a victory over the enemy, grant them a safe and swift return, and bless those who mourn the lost. Amen. I would like to introduce Acton's Veteran Services Officer, James MacRae.
Color guard, post. Welcome to today's ceremony. Thank you for attending. I'm honored to be speaking with you on such an important occasion. We're here today to honor our service members and to remember the sacrifices they have made, as well as the courage it sometimes takes to serve our country. On November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m., world leaders signed the armistice, ending World War I and its 4 years of bloody conflict. In 1954, this day was renamed to what we now know as Veterans Day. Here we are 100 years later, not just to the day, but to the exact hour when the armistice was signed. Even though Veterans Day is a day to show our respect to all veterans from all generations, this is truly a remarkable 100-year milestone of which I am proud to pay tribute to today. Thomas Paine once said, "Those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must undergo the fatigue of supporting it." Many of you here today have borne that burden and experienced the fatigue of waging war in order to bring about peace. To you, I say thank you. Thank you. Not quite done yet, but thank you. This holiday serves as a reminder that it is ultimately the veterans that have given us our freedom and security by taking on such burdens. Veteran is a title that very few hold. We have to appreciate that. And that's exactly why we're gathered here today. If you look across the street, you will see our town's World War I monument. It's right there on the corner of Town Hall. There are an impressive number of names on that monument, especially when you consider what Acton's population might have been at that time. One of those names listed is William Newsham. William and his friend boarded a ship en route to England at the start of the war in 1914. America had not yet joined the war, and he and his friend were looking for adventure. William decided to enlist in the British Army and was assigned to a cavalry unit that deployed to France. At the end of the war, he met his wife in England, brought her back to live in Acton, and then eventually settled in Stowe. To read this year's Governor's Proclamation, I would like to introduce his grandson, Acton resident William Newsham.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is a proclamation from the Governor of the Commonwealth. Whereas, since the Commonwealth's colonial days, thousands of men and women have served our country in defense of freedom and liberty. And whereas, on November 11th, 1918, the armistice was signed in the forest of Campigny by the Allied nations and Germany, ending World War I, the war to end all wars, after 4 years of conflict. And whereas since that day, every November, people from around the nation have gathered to honor our veterans, and whereas there are approximately 388,000 veterans living in Massachusetts, and whereas today we are reminded of the great sacrifices and contributions our veterans have made to our country, and whereas we honor and salute those who served our country throughout the generations with honor, patriotism, and courage, and whereas it is appropriate that all Massachusetts citizens remember the bravery of those who served their country so that their dedication and sacrifices serve as a reminder of the cost of our freedom. And whereas in November 2018, the world will commemorate the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended the fighting in World War I at 11 a.m., November 11th, 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Now, therefore, I, Charles D. Baker, Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2018, to be Veterans Day, and urge all the citizens of the Commonwealth to take cognizance of this event and participate fittingly in its observance. Given at the Executive Chamber in Boston this 11th day of November in the year 2018, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 242nd, by His Excellency Charles D. Baker, Governor of the Commonwealth, and Karen E. Polito, Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth.
Thank you, William. We will now have the National Guardsmen lay 2 wreaths, one for the World War I Memorial and one for the World War II Memorial. The Acton Minutemen and the National Guardsmen will fire 3 volleys.
Make ready. Present. Fire. Make ready. Present. Fire. Make ready. Present. Fire. Right about. Hey.
And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker. He attended Acton-Boxborough Regional High School and U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. He served as a Marine Corps infantry officer, both on active duty and as a reservist, at the platoon, company, and battalion levels in the U.S., Asia, and the Middle East. He is a graduate of the Basic School, Infantry Officers Course, and the Command and Staff College, attaining the rank of Major. He is a senior vice president at City Holdings and enjoys coaching youth sports and supporting Boy Scout Troop 32. He lives in Acton with his wife, Maureen, and their 3 children, Annie, CJ, and Teddy. It is my pleasure to introduce this year's guest speaker, Buster O'Brien.
Thank you, James, and thank you for everything that you do for our veterans and for our town. Much appreciated. Thank you to the town leadership, our elected officials, fellow citizens, families, especially the children and students here today. I'd also like to thank our first responders, all of whom work every day in challenging situations, often at great personal risk, to keep us safe and protected. Can we have a quick round of applause for our police and fire professionals? To the veterans here today, many of whom have fought in the tough battles of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and all veterans from Acton, I want to say thank you for volunteering to serve and defend the community and country we love. I grew up right over there on Nagog Hill Road playing soldier in those exact woods. My father, Dick O'Brien, was in the Naval Reserves, and my mother, Nancy, raised my brothers and sisters and I with the understanding that we were lucky to be from such an incredible community in the greatest country in the world, and that it was our responsibility to do what we can to support it. My brother Pat, a Navy Reserve pilot and OIF veteran, and I chose to answer that call in the military. I went from AB to the Naval Academy upon graduation, took my commission as an officer in the Marine Corps. I served as an infantry officer all over the world, including in Iraq. Serving with Marines is a humbling experience, and it was the greatest professional honor of my life. I receive a lot of questions about the military when Mo and I moved back to Acton. We still do regularly. Like many veterans, I have innumerable stories that run the full gamut of the human experience. But as a way to celebrate this important day and in an effort to understand and appreciate the service and sacrifice of our veterans, I'd like to share 3 thoughts that come up often when talking to people about veterans and the military in general. First, people often say to me, "Thank you for your service." I'm extremely appreciative of others' thanks, as I know they really mean it and want to express those sentiments personally to someone who has served, deployed, or fought. If I may, on behalf of all veterans here, I would like to say thank you back for that sentiment. We appreciate it. But I'd also like to offer up a challenge. When I was deployed, all I ever wanted to know was that there was people back home taking care of my family. All I ever wanted to know was that if something happened to me, they would be okay. The greatest way to thank veterans for their service is to look for ways to support the families of the men and women most impacted by that service. Most importantly, those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, our Gold Star families, many of whom we know personally. We know there are many veterans who are affected with the wounds of their experience, not all of which are visible, who could use and deserve an assist. And the families and mothers of those, and the families whose mother or father is deployed, often in our community it's reservists, we can check in on them, help them out, let them know we care. It does not take a lot of effort to find these families and the people and organizations who are doing this great work. The need is out there. It still is, and only takes the effort. Supporting them is the ultimate way to thank all veterans for their service. Second, we often hear about the expertly trained and world-class members of our military, fighter pilots, submariners, special forces operators. Let me tell you, they really are that good. They're a national treasure. I have trained with and fought with these people, and they're incredible. Literally the most skilled military personnel on earth. I'm glad they're on our side. But it's important to remember that of the 2.1 million members of the Acton and Reserve military forces, the largest subgroup is 18 to 25-year-olds on their first enlistment. These are volunteers, women and men, from all demographic, cultural, and socioeconomic realities. These young service members are doing the grunt work to keep our forces fed, healthy, maintained, trained, and ready so that they can serve in every climb and place, day after day, year after year. I know that the World War II generation is known as the greatest generation, and stories of men like Lou Schreckengost and John Martin, Maureen's grandfathers, who combined for over 20 air missions over Europe before John had his license. All right, they earned the moniker of the greatest generation. But I want everyone to know that I have personally seen these current young Americans do the most incredible, intelligent, brave, and selfless things you can possibly imagine. And they're doing them today, right now, all over the world. When major operations get ordered from Washington and resources are mobilized from ports and airfields all over the world, it is often a 19-year-old soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine on their first deployment in a dangerous situation who bears the risk and ultimately has to do something on the ground to achieve a military objective. And when they're not acting, they're on watch all day and night, regardless of the weather, regardless of their personal circumstance, far from home, for months at a time or more. Think of that. That's pretty awing. Pretty awing. The bulk of our veterans are from that patriotic lineage that says so much about who we are as a nation. It's an incredible statement about the defense of our democracy and really the freedom of the world. Third, just the thought. The service and sacrifice of our military members is unique and special in this incredible experiment that is, look, on duty right now. In this incredible experiment that is our United States. Our military exists to defend our freedoms and way of life. Sometimes we can feel so distant from that service and sacrifice in Afghanistan, Southeast Asia, wherever. But there is another way we can honor it, by doing everything we can in our community to make it worthy of that service and sacrifice. We see it in Acton all the time, working with our schools, our teachers that go so far past the requirement, youth activities, diverse religious and service organizations, incredible groups and efforts like the Veterans Day Breakfast, the Miracle League, Household Goods, and so many more. All I can say is great job and keep it up. We show respect for our veterans when we build strong communities imbued with the ideals they have sworn to defend. Community building, as your presence shows here today, is infectious, inspiring, and energizing to others. When veterans come home and see these efforts, it confirms our part of the patriotic contract and grows our collected resolve. You know, it was from this neighborhood that the original patriots marched to the bridge and conquered. It is something we have all been so proud of, those first veterans of Acton. And if you'll bear with me a bit on the metaphor here, I honestly believe if we were faced with such a clear and present danger today, our community would line up to defend all that we hold dear. The unit on the march would look very different from the one Isaac Davis commanded in 1775. This one would be filled with women and men from countries all the world over, with diverse backgrounds, hopes, and dreams, willing to defend the place that has always had room and protections for everyone willing to do so. So in conclusion, let's make the extra effort to thank all veterans by supporting those that have been most affected by our conflicts and wars. Let's remember that much of the military is the same age as our great ABRHS seniors, and they are doing incredible things in very dangerous situations to keep us safe. And let's make the effort to build a strong, diverse, and supportive community that can have constructive conversations about real issues so we know when there are real threats which require our common defense. Thank you all for taking the time to honor our veterans today. It says so much about our community that we continue to share these foundational ideas with future generations of Actonians and Americans. And to the veterans here today, thank you for inspiring us and me personally as a youngster growing up in Acton while serving around the world and living back here now. Your service in and out of uniform makes all of us want to do more and be more for our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Buster O'Brien. I'd like to introduce the Acton Minutemen and the Isaac Davis blues, fife and drum presentation on the history of the flags.
Good morning. I want to thank all the veterans out there. Can we just give them another hand? The Acton Minutemen were formed in 1963, or I should say reformed, as a ceremonial organization for the purpose of perpetuating the historic part that gunsmith Isaac Davis and his Minuteman Company played in the fight at the Old North Bridge on the morning of April 19th in 1775. Captain Davis, in response to Major Buttrick's call for a group to lead the advance on the bridge, said, "I haven't a man who's afraid to go," and swung his 38-man company into the lead. Captain Davis gave his life at the bridge that fateful morning and became one of America's first heroes in the fight for independence and the first commissioned officer to die for this country. The present Acton Minuteman Company, composed of men, women, businessmen, tradespeople, students, and other walks of life, reenacts each April 19th the March to Concord. We participate in parades and local ceremonies, as well as battle reenactments and other special events. This group, wholly voluntary and non-political, hopes by our participation in special occasions to help rekindle some of the spirit and appreciation of the heritage that made this country what it is today. This flag ceremony, which you are about to see, is one of the special performances of our unit. I am the captain of the Acton Minutemen today, and my name is Steve Crosby, and co-narrating with me is Jennifer Tote. We respectfully dedicate this presentation of Flags of the Men of Acton to our foremost heroes and veterans of the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and the wars of modern times. Why don't you? Go ahead. Men of Acton have served under many flags of our nation. Most notable are the Stars and Stripes, from the 13-star flag to the present-day 50-star flag. It is fitting and proper on this occasion, however, that we recall the banners of our heritage, the flags that men of Acton were first involved with during the birth of our nation, the banners that inspired and were inspired by the desire to be free from tyranny, but yet reflected the desire to carry forth some of the heritage of the mother country. Could we get a drum roll, please?
As might be suspected, flags of English heritage were to play the principal role in the development of our early American banners. The Cross of St. George, a red cross on a white field, and the Cross of St. Andrew, a white cross diagonally on a blue field. They were combined in 1603 to form the famous Union flag, or Union Jack, that flew over the colonies for more than a century and a half. From Jamestown to Plymouth, Boston to Acton until 1775. The present-day British Union Jack is similar with an additional diagonal red cross.
Is everyone able to hear us okay over the noise of the truck? Okay. Our second flag is the red ensign or meteor flag. The red ensign or meteor flag was commonly seen on merchant ships as well as the man of war. It was the flag of General Gage and Lord Howe as they occupied Boston and the countryside during the brewing storm of the 1760s and 70s. This flag became the basis of some of the more important flags of the colonial resistance, as we shall soon see. It inspired the Endicott flag, the Newbury flag, the New England flag, and with the word liberty in bold letters, the Taunton flag in 1774.
As the New England colonies developed a flourishing maritime trade, a popular and widely used flag became this colonial ensign, a version of the red meteor. During this time, the colonists were busily devising all types of local flags. Another of these was the New England flag, substituting a blue field for the red field, causing it to resemble another British sea flag, the blue ensign. At the conclusion of a series of conflicts involving most European nations and their North American colonies in the first half of the 18th century, new problems arose between Great Britain and her colonies. With the conclusion of the 7 Years' War and the expulsion of the French from America in 1763, the great foreign menace was removed. Thoughts turned to new relationships, imperial and local problems with the mother country. Colonial assemblies were at loggerheads with the royal governors. New crises in colonial politics occurred. The most notable was the Stamp Act troubles of the 1760s. Subsequently, the Boston Massacre of 1770, the Boston Tea Party in 1773, and the closing of the port of Boston in 1774 set the stage for war.
Our fourth flag is the Continental flag. The pine tree, long a symbol of New England, soon found its way to the banners of revolution. The Continental flag, the red meteor with the pine tree substituted for the British Union in the canton, was the first flag in universal use in this area. As time wore on, troubles grew greater. Flames of independence were fanned by incidents in Boston town, and the folks of Acton, as in other towns, were well aware of the impending conflict. In November of 1774, a company of Minutemen was raised by volunteer enlistment. Isaac Davis, a gunsmith by trade, was elected captain, and the company, by mutual agreement, met twice each week for instruction and drill. Bumpkins and yokels, according to the lobsterbacks of General Gage in Boston, were seeking to act in a military manner.
Our next flag is the Bedford flag. And so it was, as event led to event, the climax occurred on the morning of April 19th in 1775, with which we are so familiar. At the Old North Bridge, Captain Davis, unafraid, was first in the fight. Following in line after the Acton Company were 3 Concord companies, a second Acton Company, followed by companies from Bedford and Lincoln, and a third company. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled, here once the embattled farmers stood, and fired the shot heard round the world. Their flag that day was believed to be the Bedford flag, carried by Nathaniel Page of Bedford, Massachusetts, or cornet or standard bearer. The design of this flag dates back to 1659 and the militia of Middlesex County. Used in the wars against the Indians, it is thought by many to be the standard of the Minutemen at the Old North Bridge that fateful morning in April. Recent studies have questioned whether this flag was actually present at the bridge that day, but it is still taken as a symbol of strength and fortitude of the local militia, and minute companies of the day nonetheless. In a direct confrontation against British forces at the bridge, Isaac Davis and Abner Hosmer of Acton laid down their lives. Men from Acton joined in the pursuit of the British, which followed the action at the bridge. James Hayward would lose his life in the afternoon at the Fisk House in Lexington. Others went all the way to Cambridge and joined in the siege of Boston that ensued. An old order died on April 19th, simply because so many ordinary citizens believed in and answered the call of liberty.
Our sixth flag is the Bunker Hill flag. In spite of the rough treatment, the British held Boston for several more months. They were blockaded on the land side by the thousands of volunteers from the more distant parts of New England who joined the Minutemen and militia to form the strong siege line encircling the city. Veterans of former wars and the recent conflicts were there, to the names of Israel Putnam, Nathaniel Greene, John Stark, William Prescott. We must add the names of Acton's own: Hunt, Blanchard, Davis, Fletcher, Thorpe, Barker, and 18 others who fought in Colonel John Nixon's regiment with skill under this banner and the Pine Tree banner at Bunker Hill, June 17th, 1775.
Our seventh flag is the Union or Cambridge flag. In the latter part of 1775, the Continental Congress, recognizing the need for a continental flag, appointed a committee of Benjamin Franklin, Benjamin Harris, and Thomas Lynch to journey to Boston and there confer with General Washington regarding a national flag. The idea of a new and opposing flag was not accepted unanimously. Many hoped for reconciliation with England, including Washington, and the Conference of December 13, 1775, was a heated one. However, it was at last decided that a flag should be devised which would contain a bold element, indicating the colonies were united and the union of military strength would be a prominent feature in the new banner. The result was the Grand Union flag, containing the crosses of St. George and St. Andrew on the blue field, with 13 stripes alternating red and white for the 13 colonies. It was officially hoisted January 2, 1776, by General Washington at Cambridge as the standard of the Continental Army, and hence is sometimes referred to as the Cambridge flag. It remained our national flag until June 14, 1777. Men from Acton served under this flag at Dorchester Heights in the Siege of Boston and later in the Battle of White Plains, New York.
Our eighth flag is the Liberty Tree flag. On March 17, 1776, Lord Howe and General Gage, under pressure of newly positioned cannon of the rebels, were forced to evacuate Boston. Before evacuation, however, General Gage chose to cut down one of the symbols of resistance, the Liberty Tree, the rallying point of the Sons of Liberty. While the Union of Cambridge flag was the flag of the nation, symbolic banners of local resistance continued to be used. The Liberty Tree banner was born to perpetuate the symbol of continued resistance to British rule in Massachusetts and the nation.
Our ninth flag is the 13-star flag. In 1777, it is said that a committee consisting of General Washington, Robert Morris, and Colonel Ross called on Betsy Ross and asked if she could make a flag after the design they showed her. She agreed, but suggested that the stars be 5-pointed, the French rule rather than 6-pointed, the English rule. Legend has it that General Washington described the flag in these words: "We take the stars from heaven, the red from our mother country, separating it by white stripes, thus showing that we have separated from her, and the white stripes shall go down to posterity, representing liberty." The Stars and Stripes was born in the midst of combat. It was a banner of people in travail, giving birth to a new nation founded upon liberty and freedom. Its first use is claimed at Fort Stanwix in Fort Schuyler, New York, during a siege of English and Indians. This flag was cheered by patriots at Valley Forge in the winter of 1777-78 and at the Battle of Yorktown. Men of Acton served under this banner henceforth until a change occurred in 1795.
Our 10th flag is the 15-star and 15-stripe flag. With the passage of time, new states were admitted to the Union, creating a new problem for our flag's design. It was intended that one star and one stripe would be added for each state. On May 1st, 1795, it was provided by Congress that the national flag should have 15 stars and 15 stripes, representing the addition to the Union of Vermont and Kentucky. This flag, in use from 1795 to 1818, became affectionately known as the Star-Spangled Banner. It derived its fame flying over Fort McHenry during the British bombardment the night of September 13th and 14th in 1814. Francis Scott Key, a Baltimore lawyer, was detained by the British while seeking the release of friends. After a night of anxiety, at dawn the flag still flew, and Key was inspired to write the immortal words of the Star-Spangled Banner. This banner also flew on the Constitution on the Tripoli expedition of 1805, and was the first flag carried across the continent on the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1804-06. Men of Acton served under this flag during the War of 1812.
If everyone would stand, please.
Unless you
Unless you
can't.
Don't need to. The 11th flag is the 50-star flag and Minuteman flag with the color guard. No, sorry.
No Minuteman flag.
Okay, sorry.
50-star.
Just the 50-star flag. In 1818, by act of Congress, the number of stripes was fixed at 13, and that after July 4th, 1818, only new stars would be added for each new state entering the Union. In 1818, our flag was 20 stars. By 1848, at the close of the Mexican War, our flag had 29 stars. 4 new stars were added between the Mexican and Civil Wars. In 1861, Acton's men served under the 34-star flag, and later in 1864 under the 36-star flag. Acton's veterans of the Spanish-American War fought under 45 stars. The 48-star flag, notable for its length of use, 47 years, from 1912 to 1959, was the banner of Acton's fighting men in 2 world wars. The 49-star flag was in use 1 year when it was superseded by the 50 stars.
As we look back on over 200 years of history, we are reminded that our forebears, under many different banners, have given the last full measure. The last full measure to preserve the right of free choice in governing themselves, and the 4 essential human freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom to worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. They remind us also that freedom is not without its price and its obligations, today as it was in their day. Acton's Minutemen of today march in memory of April 19, 1775, and those men who have gone since that time, with a new banner commemorating the heritage of the past, a pride and responsibility in the present, and a hope for the future. And we, too, are not afraid to go into that future. Thank you for coming out today.
For those of you who wish to seat, you can be seated. The Acton Boxborough High School's National Honor Society will be hosting the 5th Annual Veterans Day Breakfast. This breakfast will take place tomorrow at 8:30 at the Boxborough Regency Hotel. This is a collaboration between the National Honor Society and the Acton Boxborough Rotary Club. There are over 200 Acton and Boxborough veterans signed up so far. So for any veterans here who have not yet signed up and would like to attend, please see me after the ceremony and I can give you the contact information for that. And for the last 3 days, the Acton Historical Society has been hosting a veterans exhibit at the Hosmer House Museum, located at 300 Main Street. This exhibit focuses on World War I artifacts and memorabilia, particularly items associated with Acton residents. For anyone who may be interested, the exhibit will be open until 1 p.m. today, as well as 10 to 1 p.m. tomorrow. And I want to thank everyone for attending today's ceremony, veterans especially. I'd also like to thank some of the town officials here with us today. Our town manager, John Mangiarotti, Selectmen Joan Gardner, Janet Adachi, and John Benson. And last but not least, I would like to express my gratitude to the National Guard members here with us that are currently stationed at Fort Devens for training. Sergeant Macelin Alexis, Sergeant Jeffrey Boland, Sergeant Shane Griffin, Sergeant Matthew Link, Sergeant Gregory Martinez, Sergeant Jake Maxwell, Sergeant Adrian Marcado, Sergeant Obasi Rowland, Sergeant Nicholas Strange, Sergeant Derek Sawyer, Sergeant Adam Kahn, and class instructors Sergeant First Class Gonzalez and Sergeant First Class Pitkin. They volunteer their time and resources to help with today's ceremony, and we can't thank them enough. I know I missed, there's more National Guard members than I had names, so I apologize for anyone I missed, but thank you very much for helping us out. And now we will have Gail Sawyer come up for the benediction.
We'd also like to thank the Acton Minutemen for their presentation of the history of the flags. If you would like to join us in the benediction, please bow your heads. May God give us grace to lift up those who are strengthened in the crucible. Stand with those who still bear its marks. And most of all, never, never, never to forget the debt of gratitude we owe them. Never forget. Amen. This concludes this year's Veterans Day ceremony. Thank you all for coming.